How could you? After all these years, how could you humiliate me like this?
The day my husband erased me from our life didn't start with a scream. It started with a silence. I remember that silence so clearly. It wrapped around me like a thin layer of cold fog, the kind that creeps into your bones before you even notice the chill. It was early morning, our anniversary morning, and for the first time in 10 years, the house didn't sound like home. No laughter from the kids arguing over cereal, no clatter of dishes from the kitchen where I usually prepared his lunch, no footsteps, no humming, no warmth, just silence. I stood at the edge of our hallway holding the small white envelope I had tucked beneath my pillow the night before, my anniversary letter to Michael. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of sacrifices, learning, loving, forgiving, trying. The letter wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I had written about how grateful I was, how proud I felt watching him become a father, how I hoped we would grow old together. If you had asked me that morning, I would have told you that our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was ours, steady, reliable, stitched together by 1,000 everyday moments. But looking back now, that silence was the first crack in the glass. I called out, "Michael?" My voice echoed back at me, thin and lonely. I walked into the living room and stopped. The breakfast table was cleared. No bowls, no crumbs, no tiny messes from the kids. Just clean surfaces. Too clean, like no one had eaten at all. "Kids?" I called again, softer this time. Still nothing. For a moment, confusion prickled at the back of my neck. Then I checked the garage. Michael's car was gone. The kids' shoes were gone. Even the little pink lunchbox my daughter, Emma, refused to leave behind. Gone. I frowned and unlocked my phone to check our family group chat. No messages. That was strange. They always woke me if they left early. Always. I tried calling Michael. Straight to voicemail. I tried calling my son Bennett, though at 8 years old he usually ignored phone calls. His tablet was powered off. So I tried one more time. This time, my call rang. But it wasn't answered. I stared at the silent kitchen and felt that cold fog wrap tighter around my ribs. It didn't feel like a simple mix-up. It didn't feel like a surprise or a sweet gesture. It felt wrong. To distract myself, I tried to go back to the anniversary plans I had spent 3 weeks preparing. A home-cooked dinner, his favorite strawberry shortcake, the little gift box tucked inside the kitchen drawer with a watch engraved on the back. 10 years down, forever to go. I set the box on the table and looked at it for a long moment. I told myself, he probably took the kids to school. Maybe his phone died. Maybe I'm overthinking again. That was something he often told me. "You're always worrying for nothing, Clara." But that morning, my instincts whispered something else. Still, I tried to push through the day. I folded towels, I opened windows to let in fresh air. I even tried humming the soft little tune my grandmother used to sing while cooking, just to feel less alone. But every time my phone buzzed, that fog squeezed a little tighter. At 10:14 a.m., the phone finally rang. It wasn't Michael. It was my sister, Laura. Her voice came bright and warm, the opposite of the icy quiet in my home. "Happy anniversary, sis! What did Michael do? Did he surprise you again?" I swallowed hard. "They all left early this morning." "Left? All of them? For what?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." I could almost hear her frowning through the phone. "Didn't he say anything last night?" "Nothing unusual." "Well," she said slowly, "maybe he planned something special and just didn't tell you." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to cling to it like a life raft in cold water. But something about the way the beds were made, the way the dishes were stacked, the way the house looked like it had been cleared out with careful intention, it made my stomach twist. Still, I forced a smile into my voice. You're probably right. We talked a few more minutes before hanging up. Afterwards, I walked around the house again looking for anything that could explain the strange emptiness, but nothing was missing except my family. At 11:22 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A message from Michael. "Kids are with me today. Don't worry about us." That was all. No explanation, no apology, and certainly no anniversary wishes. Something in my chest sank, slow, heavy, painful. I typed, "Where are you? Why didn't you wake me up?" No response. I stared at the message bubble until the words blurred. The house felt smaller, tighter. I grabbed my keys and headed to the car. If he wasn't answering, I would find him myself. By noon, I was driving through town searching. The school parking lot was empty. His office was closed. He had taken a personal day. I drove past the park, the grocery store, even his mother's house. No sign of them. With every turn of the wheel, frustration, hurt, and worry knotted together inside me. Then, as I turned down Redwood Lane to take the long route home, my phone vibrated again. A picture message from an unknown number. The image loaded slowly, as if the universe knew I wasn't ready to see it all at once. First came the outline of my husband, his familiar stance, his hand tucked casually into his pocket. Then the two kids, my kids, standing beside him, eating popsicles. Then the woman, a woman I had never seen before, smiling warmly at my daughter, her hand resting gently on my son's shoulder. The caption read, "Thank you for letting them come today." I pulled the car over so fast I nearly hit the curb. My heart punched against my ribs, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The kids, the stranger, my husband, all together, like a family. My hands trembled as I called the number back. A woman answered. "Hello?" Her voice, soft, sweet, unaware of the bomb she had dropped, made my skin crawl. "Who is this?" I whispered. "Oh, you must be Clara," she said brightly. "I'm so glad you called. I've actually been meaning to talk to you." My throat closed. Talk to me? Why? Who was she to speak to me like this? I'm sorry, I managed. "Do I know you?" There was a pause. Then she said, softly, almost kindly, "I'm Michael's partner." The world stopped spinning. My blood roared in my ears. And then she added, "I was hoping you'd sign the papers today." I felt my soul split clean in half. I wasn't even home yet, and somehow, my husband had already started erasing me. I remember standing there in that quiet kitchen, letting the morning settle around me like dust after a long day's work. The children's backpacks were lined up by the door just the way I taught them, zippers closed, shoes tucked underneath, lunch boxes cooling on the counter. I always said a home runs smooth when the little things stay in order. Back then, everything in my life felt like it hummed with a comforting rhythm. I woke up before dawn, brewed the same brand of chicory coffee my mother used to drink, and listened to the house waking up one small sound at a time. My daughter Mia humming while brushing her teeth. My son Jordan tapping the banister as he slid his hand along it. Even the kettle had a particular whistle, high at first, then steady and sure, like it knew its job. And in those days, when I thought our marriage was still whole, I used to lean against the counter and wait for Marcus to walk into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, hair still damp from the shower. He'd kiss the back of my neck, grab his thermos from the cabinet, and say, "Morning, baby," with that low voice that used to turn my whole soul warm. But that particular morning, that warmth had been fading, little by little, the way you don't notice a season changing until the leaves are already on the ground. Marcus came down later than usual, dressed sharper than he needed to be for a Tuesday. His tie was knotted tight, his shirt crisp. The scent of his cologne, cedar and patchouli, was stronger than usual, like he'd stood in the bathroom spraying it into the air and walking through it. He didn't kiss my neck. He didn't even look at me long, just brushed past and grabbed his keys. "You eating before you go?" I asked lightly, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer first. Instead, he tapped his phone twice, fast, the way he always did when checking a notification. Already had something, but the sink was empty. No bowl, no mug, nothing. It didn't make sense, but I let the thought slide off me. Back then, I still gave him the grace I hoped someone would give me if I ever messed up. He walked to the door, and when Mia yelled, "Daddy, you didn't say goodbye," he turned and gave her a rushed half smile, pulling the door open like the house was suddenly too small for him. "I'll see y'all tonight," he said. But the tone, it had that thinness to it, the kind someone uses when their mind is somewhere else entirely. The kids left for school and the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I found myself wiping a counter that was already clean, trying to press my nerves flat. That afternoon, I baked his favorite cornbread, the golden one with honey brushed across the top. I even pulled out the cast iron skillet his grandmother left him. I wanted something warm waiting when he walked through the door, something that might pull him back into us. But evening came and went. The kids ate, the cornbread cooled, and Marcus never showed. When I finally heard his footsteps on the porch, it was nearly 11 p.m. He smelled like cologne, again, but not the same one he'd put on that morning. This one was sweeter, almost floral, like something someone else had pressed against him. He slid into the kitchen and froze when he saw me sitting at the table. "You're still up?" he asked. His voice cracked, just barely, enough to make my stomach clench. "I was waiting," I said. I didn't raise my voice, didn't throw accusations. That wasn't my way. "You didn't answer my calls." He rubbed his hand across the back of his neck. "Long day. Didn't hear my phone. But I had called 6 times. 6, and every one had gone straight to voicemail." I looked at him while he avoided looking at me, and something inside me whispered, "Pay attention." He went to bed without touching the cornbread, without touching me, without even mentioning our anniversary, though it was only 3 days away, and I'd left the reservation confirmation on the counter where he normally smile and say, "You always think of everything." That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. Slow, even, a little too even. I felt a chill move through me like the truth was standing by the doorway waiting for me to stop pretending. But I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. The next morning, Marcus left before the sun rose. No kiss, no coffee, no nothing. Not even a whisper of the affection he used to pour over us so easily. I should have been angry. Maybe if I'd been a different kind of woman, I would have stormed out of bed demanding answers. But I wasn't raised like that. I believed in patience. I believed in time revealing what words tried to hide. And so I watched, quietly, carefully. I started noticing things. The shirts he said were at the cleaners never came back with receipts. The sudden meetings that stretched 5 hours long. The new phone password he set one night in the bathroom. I heard the faint beeps through the door. But the moment that pierced me, the moment that sliced through the last bit of denial I held on to, happened 3 days later, our 10th anniversary. I woke before dawn, heart fluttering with old memories. 10 years, a whole decade. I made breakfast, eggs, biscuits, fruit, and set the table with the good plates. The kids woke up excited, chattering about the little card they had made for him. But when Marcus came downstairs, he didn't smile. He didn't even notice the table. He said, "I have to go in early today." "But Marcus, I know what day it is," he cut in sharply. "We'll talk later." He walked out the door, letting it slam behind him. Mia looked up at me confused. "Mommy? Daddy's mad?" I swallowed hard, smoothing her hair. "No, baby. Daddy's just tired." It was the first lie I told that week, but it wouldn't be the last. That evening, I decided to surprise him at work.
I packed a small container of the leftover cornbread, put on a soft dress, blue, his favorite, and told the kids we'd pick up something sweet from the bakery. I drove to his office building humming lightly, trying to convince myself I wasn't nervous, but when I pulled up to the parking lot, his car wasn't there. Not in his spot, not anywhere. I checked the time, 6:17 p.m. He was supposed to have been off at 5. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse slow but heavy. Something was wrong. Wrong in a way I could no longer excuse. I called Mia's phone thinking maybe he'd pick the kids up early, but she answered clearly, her voice bright, the sound of cartoons in the background. She chirped, "We're at the daddy's friend's house." I frowned. "What friend?" she said, innocently. "Miss Tasha. Daddy said she made spaghetti." My whole world tilted. I didn't know any Tasha. I didn't know any woman who would be feeding my children without as much as a call. My heart dropped into my stomach, and the cornbread container on the passenger seat suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I said softly, "Mia, can you hand the phone to Daddy?" She replied, "He's in the shower." Shower. My husband, in another woman's home, showering. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. And that was the moment, the exact second, that the life I thought I had began to split straight down the middle.
I sat there, in the parking lot of my husband's office building, the steering wheel pressing into my palms, feeling like I'd slipped straight into someone else's life, someone watching their marriage crack open from the inside. Mia's little voice still echoed in my ear. He's in the shower. Not at work, not stuck in traffic, not grabbing dinner with coworkers, showering. In another woman's home, while my children sat in her living room, eating spaghetti. I'd always thought betrayals were loud things, breaking glass, slammed doors, screaming matches. But this one, it came quiet, soft. So soft I almost didn't hear it at first. I drew in a slow breath, put the car in drive, and whispered to myself, "Don't fall apart behind the wheel." The road felt longer than usual, every turn heavier. My hands were steady, but my heart was moving wild inside me, jumping between explanations. Maybe it was a cousin I'd never met. Maybe a coworker, helping him with something. Maybe you already know the truth. I pulled up to our house, parked, and sat for a long moment in the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Only when I felt strong enough to stand did I step inside. The house greeted me like always, the smell of lavender cleaner, the soft tick of the hallway clock, but everything felt wrong, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I went straight to the kitchen, took out a notebook, and wrote down the address Mia had mentioned. I didn't trust my memory right then. My mind felt fogged over, heavy, like someone had draped a wet blanket across it. I wasn't planning a confrontation. Not that night, not yet. I just needed clarity. But clarity has a harsh way of showing up whether you're ready or not. The next day was Wednesday, and Marcus left the house even earlier than usual. He kissed the kids lightly on their heads, but still wouldn't meet my eyes. I watched him walk out to the driveway, watched the way he kept checking his phone, watched how quickly he pulled off like a man running towards something rather than away. The moment the car disappeared down the street, I gathered my things, keys, phone, notebook, and waited until the kids' school bus pulled away. Then I drove. Not wildly, not rushed. I drove with a calm that didn't match the storm inside me. The neighborhood Mia had described was across town, too far for a friend he'd never mentioned to be convenient for babysitting. When I turned onto a cul-de-sac lined with neat hedges and identical mailboxes, the address felt like a punch. A beautiful 2-story home, fresh paint, bright shutters, the kind of place someone bought with intention. I pulled over 3 houses down and cut the engine. My breath sat tight in my chest. For a long moment, I stared, and then I saw it. His car, parked right in front. I didn't get out. I didn't march up to the door. I didn't ring the bell. That wasn't my spirit, and it wasn't my strategy. Instead, I watched. A few minutes later, the front door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-30s. Pretty, hair tied up, wearing a soft robe like she had just woken up in comfort. She bent down, picking up a newspaper from the porch, humming lightly to herself. My heart knocked against my ribs, hard, because nothing in her body language said visitor. She moved like she lived there, like she belonged. She walked back inside, leaving the door open just enough for me to see the edge of a hallway. A framed picture hung there, but from where I sat, I couldn't see who was in it. I leaned back in my seat, my pulse drumming in my ears. 1,000 memories swirled through me, each slicing deeper. Marcus laughing at the kids' swim lessons. Marcus cooking Sunday breakfast in his worn t-shirt. Marcus rubbing my back when I cried after my father passed. And now Marcus, in a house I'd never seen, with a woman whose name my children knew better than I did. I closed my eyes, trying to gather the strength that every woman finds at the edge of heartbreak, the kind that grows from somewhere, deeper than fear, deeper than love, even deeper than anger. I whispered, "Lord, help me." And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I didn't cling to denial any longer, the front door opened again. This time, he stepped out. My husband, hair damp, shirt untucked, moving with the kind of ease a man only carries in a place he considers home. He stood on the porch, stretching, looking at his phone. He laughed at something, a light, familiar laugh, a laugh he hadn't given me in months. Then the woman stepped behind him, slid her arms around his waist, and rested her cheek on his back as though she had done it 1,000 times. He didn't move away. He didn't hesitate. He placed his hand over hers. And I felt something inside me shatter. Softly, quietly, a break that made no sound but echoed all the same. He kissed her forehead. She said something, and they both laughed again before walking back inside, closing the door gently behind them. I pressed my fist to my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound, because the truth wasn't creeping anymore. It was standing right in front of me. Plain, naked, cruel. My husband had a second home, a second life, a second woman. And my children had been inside that house, eating her food, sitting on her couch, calling her by her first name like she was some kind of extended aunt. My throat tightened, and the world around me blurred. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I wiped my eyes, straightened my back, and whispered, "This isn't the end of my story." Because even then, hurt, stunned, shaking, I felt something anchoring me. Maybe it was dignity. Maybe it was wisdom. Maybe it was the strength women inherit from their mothers and grandmothers without even knowing. But I wasn't going to fall apart in that cul-de-sac. I turned the key, started the car, and drove away with my heart in pieces, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. And in that clarity, a seed began to form. Not revenge, not rage. Something far more dangerous to a man who thought I would stay small, resolute.
Resolve is a strange thing. It doesn't come in loud declarations or fists pounding the table or broken dishes on a kitchen floor. No, it comes quietly, like a soft click inside the heart, a shift you feel more than hear. By the time I pulled back into our driveway, that shift had fully settled inside me. I sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at a house I had built, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, prayer by prayer, and I whispered to myself, I'm not walking into this blind anymore. The kids burst through the door the second I stepped inside, their arms wrapping around my waist, their joy, their innocence. It grounded me. It reminded me of what mattered most and what, in all of this, I needed to protect. "Mommy, can we have pancakes for dinner?" Jordan asked, tugging at my sleeve. "Yes, baby," I said, smoothing his curls. "We can have whatever you want tonight." As they ran off, I felt something tug deep in my chest. Fear, grief, anger, maybe all three tangled together, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't their burden. The pain between adults should never rest on children's shoulders. While the pancake batter sizzled in the pan, my mind replayed the scene in front of that other house, the way he had touched her, the way she held him,
The way he laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from a man unbothered, unafraid, and entirely comfortable. A laugh he hadn't shared with me in months. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped the pancake, and I forced myself to breathe slow. Don't fall apart. Not yet. Marcus came home late that night. Again. But this time, I was prepared. I sat in the living room with the lamp on low, a folded blanket over my legs. On the coffee table sat his untouched anniversary gift, wrapped neatly in cream and gold paper. And beside it, the notebook where I had written the address. He walked through the door smelling like the same cologne from that morning, but under it, I could detect traces of another perfume. Something floral, something feminine, something not mine. He froze when he saw me. "You're up," he said, cautiously. "I am. Everything okay?" He tried to sound casual, the way guilty men always do when they don't know what their wife knows or how much. "I think you know the answer to that," I replied softly. He swallowed, his eyes flicking to the notebook on the table, then back to me. His jaw tightened. "What's this about?" he asked. I didn't look away. My voice stayed calm, controlled, the very thing that unsettles a man expecting a storm. "Where were you today, Marcus?" "At work." "Try again." He dropped his keys onto the table with more force than necessary. "Why are we doing this right now? The kids are asleep." "So, tell me," I said, leaning forward slightly, "where you were." For a moment, he held his breath. Then he exhaled hard, his shoulders slumping just a fraction. "I was handling something for a friend." "A friend named Tasha?" I asked. His eyes flickered, just long enough. "Who told you that?" he snapped. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He looked away, jaw clenching tight, one hand gripping the back of the couch like he needed something to steady himself. "Look," he began, rubbing a hand over his face, "I didn't want you worrying. She's just someone helping with..." "Helping with what?" I whispered. "Your laundry? Your cravings? Your morning routines? Your showers?" His head snapped up. There it was, the truth hitting him square in the face. His body language shifted in an instant. Defensive, guarded, cornered. "Did you follow me?" he demanded. And that right there was the moment I felt something inside me harden. Not cruelty, not rage, just clarity. "I didn't follow you," I said quietly. "Our daughter told me where you were." His face changed, not with guilt, but with annoyance, with frustration, like I was inconveniencing him. "Great," he muttered. "So now you've got the kids involved?" "No," I said firmly. "You involved them when you took them to another woman's home." Silence fell between us, thick, heavy, suffocating. He paced once, twice, then stopped and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It's not what you think," he repeated, the same tired line cheating men cling to like a lifeline. I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, didn't beg. "I saw you, Marcus." He froze. "I saw you with her, at her house, this morning." The room shifted. His shoulders lowered, his eyes closed, his breath left him in one long exhale, the exhale of a man who realized the lies had all run out. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. He wasn't angry now. He wasn't defensive. He was resigned. "I was going to tell you," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. "When?" I asked softly. "After you built a whole life with her? After you erased me from ours?" His silence was the answer. I nodded slowly, absorbing the confirmation I didn't want, but knew was coming. "How long?" He hesitated, and that hesitation hurt worse than anything else. 3 years, he finally said. My breath hitched, but I kept my voice steady. 3 years. He looked away. 3 years of lies. 3 years of divided time. 3 years of secrets slip-knotted behind my back. 3 years of a second life I wasn't even invited to know about. My fingers tightened around a blanket on my lap, grounding myself. "Do you love her?" I asked. He didn't answer. His silence said everything his words couldn't. And in that moment, something in me, the part that believed, hoped, trusted, loosened its grip. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I saw the truth of what he had become. A man who had already decided to live without me. But betrayal isn't a single blow. It comes in waves. Because just as I was gathering my breath, steadying myself against the next hit, he spoke again. And the words he said next, those words would change everything. "Her lawyer wants to talk to you about signing the papers." I blinked. "What papers?" He hesitated again, then finally looked at me. "The dissolution. The the ex-wife signature." The blanket slipped from my lap. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "Ex-wife?" I whispered, my voice barely forming the shape of the word. "You filed something?" He didn't respond. Not immediately. And the quiet between us became the loudest thing I had ever heard.
The word ex-wife echoed in my mind like a stone dropping into still water, ripples spreading, widening, breaking everything in their path. Ex-wife. I stared at him, unable to breathe, blink, move. It was as if my body had been temporarily disconnected from my soul. He shifted his weight. "I wasn't trying to blindside you," he said softly, but he had, and he knew it. "What exactly did you file?" I asked, my voice so calm it scared even me. "A dissolution," he repeated. "An uncontested one, so it wouldn't get ugly." Uncontested? The arrogance of it. The assumption that I would just sign away my marriage, my family, my entire life, without a fight, without a question, without a voice. It lit something inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a spark, one that tasted like steel. "When?" I asked. "Last month." My stomach twisted. "Last month you were still sleeping in my bed." He looked down. "I didn't want to complicate things with the kids." My hands curled into fists in my lap. "So that's what I was now, a complication." "Why didn't you tell me?" I pressed. This time, he didn't hesitate. "Because I knew you wouldn't take it well." I let out a breath, slow, controlled. "So you'd rather I hear it from a lawyer?" He shrugged helplessly. "It's easier that way." Easier. It was strange how one word can make every memory, every birthday laugh, every late night talk, every shared dream suddenly feel counterfeit. "Easier for who?" I whispered. He didn't answer. The air in the room changed. The soft kind of suffocation that comes not from fear, but from realization. A realization that the person you built a life with had already begun dismantling it while you were still inside. "You really believe I'm just going to sign whatever you put in front of me?" I asked. It's standard stuff," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Nothing dramatic. I kept the assets simple." "The assets?" I cut in. He swallowed. My voice dropped. "Tell me what you did." He took a step back, the way a man does when he knows he crossed a line even he wasn't ready to admit. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." "Then why'd you move everything into the trust?" I asked. His eyes snapped to mine, and that's how I knew. He didn't expect me to know that. He didn't expect me to be the woman I am. "How long have you been preparing for this?" I asked. "Please don't do this," he whispered. But he still didn't deny it. And silence, as I had learned tonight, was simply the truth spoken in a different language. I took a breath. A real one, filling my lungs until it hurt. Then I asked the question I had avoided for hours. "Is she pregnant?" He froze. His jaw trembled. Barely. But it was enough. "Oh, so that's what this is." He dropped onto the arm of the sofa, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together like a man praying for a version of the truth that didn't exist. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Did you mean for a child to happen?" He buried his face in his hands. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to block him out, but to hold myself steady, to keep my spine from bending under the weight of what I already knew was real. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy. Not with regret, but with fear of what this would cost him, of what he'd already done, of what would unravel next. "She wants to be recognized as a partner," he said. "Legally, financially. She wants security before the baby comes." "And you want me to give that to her?" I asked. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just stared at me, the way a man looks at a door he's hoping will open by itself. But betrayal isn't linear. It doesn't follow clean steps. It comes in waves, and just when you think one has hit you with full force, another rises behind it, taller, darker, heavier. He took a breath, a long one. "There's something else," he said. I felt the room tilt again, but I held still. "Go on." He reached down to his bag, the same bag he carried every day, the one I had packed lunches into for years, and pulled out a manila envelope. He held it out to me. "For your review." I didn't take it. "What's inside?" He lowered his eyes. "The agreement. And the request for you to release any claim to..." He stopped. But I waited. He swallowed hard and finished, "To the house." I stared at him. "You want this house?" I asked slowly. "It's complicated," he whispered. "It's not just me asking." My voice cracked, not with emotion, but with disbelief. "She wants the house?" Again, he didn't answer, which meant yes. The woman he'd been seeing for 3 years, the one carrying his child, the one whose doorstep I had stood before earlier today without even knowing who she was to him. She wanted my home, my kitchen, my staircase, my backyard, my children's bedrooms, my memories, my mother's china, my life. Every piece of me that had been poured into these walls, she wanted it. "She thinks it will make things easier for the baby," he said weakly. "A fresh start." A fresh start with my house. I felt something in me snap, not into pieces, but into alignment. Because there in that moment, I understood. Marcus wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He wasn't overwhelmed. He had chosen. He had chosen her. He had chosen this. He had chosen a life without me, and he wanted me to make it convenient. I finally took the envelope from his hand, but not with trembling fingers, with steady ones, because if this was the game he wanted to play, then he had finally awakened the strategist in me. I stood. "Marcus?" "Yeah," he said quietly. I looked him dead in the eye. "You're going to regret underestimating me."
I didn't sleep that night. While the house rested, while the children dreamed in their rooms and Marcus pretended not to be lying awake in the guest room down the hall, I sat at the kitchen table with the manila envelope in front of me. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should ever feel. I ran my fingers along the seal, but didn't open it yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to understand the battlefield before stepping into it. I had been blindsided once. It wouldn't happen again. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, indifferent to heartbreak. And the moonlight, coming through the window, cast a pale line across the table, like a fault line between the life I had lived and the one I was about to step into. When I finally opened the envelope, the first page hit me like a physical blow. There it was. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Uncontested. Filed, dated, stamped. My name, spelled correctly. His name, sitting right above it, like a shadow. But what caught my breath wasn't the header. It was the second line. Primary residence to be transferred to petitioner. Petitioner. That was him. He wanted the house. He wanted it legally. He wanted it now. And not just for himself. There was a clause beneath it, one I had to read twice because my brain refused to process the audacity. Intended future occupants may include offspring and cohabitating partner. Cohabitating partner. She wasn't even his wife. She wasn't even his fiancée. She was what? A 25-year-old with a mortgage dream. And yet he, the man I built a life with, had put her into legal paperwork that would determine my future. My breath came slow and controlled, but inside me, something was sparking, sharpening, waking. Line by line, I reviewed the entire draft. Financial disclosures incomplete. Assets not reported. Irregular withdrawals. A trust I hadn't been informed of. Property reassignments I hadn't signed for. A missing retirement account. Custody terms written as if I were temporary. By the time I finished the last page, one fact became clear. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. Calculated, deliberate, executed over months, maybe years. He wasn't trying to leave me. He was trying to erase me. At 6:12 a.m., the first light of dawn slipped through the blinds, and I closed the folder with a finality that felt like closing a chapter, but not the book. The kids woke up soon after. Their little footsteps, their sleepy voices, their soft morning hugs, all of it pressed like balm against the bruising inside me. I dressed them, fed them, brushed their hair. I made breakfast, I packed lunches, I kissed foreheads. And the entire time, I moved with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Because they weren't going to lose their home. Not like this. Not because of someone else's choices. When the kids left for school, Marcus came into the kitchen, avoiding eye contact, his face puffy from a sleepless night. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "We can't." He blinked, thrown off by how calm I was. "You didn't have to look at the papers alone," he murmured. "I could have explained." "There's nothing you can explain that isn't already written in black and white." He shifted, guilt crawling across his expression like sweat. "I didn't want it to be hostile. You filed behind my back." He swallowed. "You moved assets without disclosing them." He looked at the floor. "You tried to take the house." His jaw clenched. "You involved our kids. You introduced them to someone. You built a life with her while still living in mine." He didn't respond. "And you want to talk about hostility?" Silence. He finally whispered, "I didn't think it would hurt you like this." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me in a cold wave. "You didn't think cheating on me, lying to me, trying to divorce me in secret, and attempting to take everything I built would hurt?" He shut his eyes. "I messed up." "No," I said. "You calculated." He looked up sharply, the way a man does when he realizes his wife is not broken, but waking up. I picked up the envelope, tapped it neatly against the counter, and tucked it under my arm. "I'm getting a lawyer," he said. "Wait." I cut him off. "No, you wanted this. You started this. So now we're doing it the right way. You don't need a lawyer," he insisted. "This isn't supposed to be a fight." "When you tried to take a woman's home," I said, "you are declaring war." His mouth opened,
then shut again. He didn't expect me to say that, or mean it. He followed me as I walked toward the door. "Can we at least talk about custody?" he asked. I turned to him slowly, very slowly. "You'll talk to my attorney about custody." He inhaled sharply, that tiny flicker of fear again. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stepped closer, close enough for him to see every inch of the woman he thought would crumble. "I'm not making it hard," I said gently. "You did." I reached the door, but before I opened it, I looked back one final time. "And Marcus," he looked up, "you might be sleeping in the guest room now. But by the time this is over," my voice dropped to a quiet, steady whisper, "you won't be sleeping in this house at all." I walked out the door, holding the envelope, the weight of it no longer frightening, but empowering, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving. I was preparing. And the war he thought I would never fight, I was already stepping on to the battlefield.
I didn't drive straight to the attorney's office. Instead, I parked near the lake. The same lake Marcus and I used to visit on Sunday afternoons, back when we still remembered how to hold each other's silences without fear. The air was cool, the water still, and the world felt quiet in a way my mind wasn't. Leaves drifted across the lake's surface, slow and unbothered, gliding wherever the breeze took them. I envied them for a moment, but then I reminded myself, I wasn't drifting. I was steering. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel lightly, letting the rhythm of my breath settle into something steady. I needed clarity, not anger, to win the kind of fight I was stepping into. When I finally walked into the attorney's office, I carried the envelope like it was both evidence and prophecy. The receptionist gave me a calm smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "I need a consultation," I said, "as soon as possible." She glanced at the clock, then the schedule. "We have an opening in 30 minutes with Attorney Baines. Would you like to wait?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Those 30 minutes felt like sitting on the edge of a cliff. But somehow, I remained steady. When they called my name, I followed a soft-spoken paralegal to a small but warm office. A bookshelf filled the wall behind the desk, not decorative books, but thick binders, case files, state codes flagged with sticky notes and colored tabs. A woman in her 50s rose from behind the desk. She had silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, deep-set eyes, and an expression that held both compassion and caution. "Mrs. Henderson?" she said. "For now," I replied. She nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the weight in my voice. "Please," she gestured, "have a seat. Tell me everything." And so I did. I told her about the anniversary morning, about the kids disappearing to a house I never knew existed, about meeting the woman, about the request for my blessing, about the months of distance, the lies, the shifting patterns, and finally, the envelope. When I placed it on her desk, she didn't open it immediately. She watched me for a long moment instead, as if assessing the strength beneath my hurt. Then she opened it. She flipped through each page slowly, methodically, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. By the time she closed it, she had the look of a woman ready to protect something valuable. "Well," she said softly, "this is worse than you think." I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't flinch. "How bad?" "Your husband has been planning this for at least a year, possibly longer." I inhaled slowly. "He's shifted assets into an account you weren't made aware of. That alone is grounds for legal repercussions. The petition's language suggests an attempt to minimize your marital share. And the housing clause?" She tapped it lightly. "Unethical at best, coercive at worst." I pressed my palms together, absorbing everything. She continued,
The biggest concern is the financial non-disclosure. He's hiding something. Possibly a lot. I nodded slowly. I felt that. What you're dealing with, she said gently, isn't just a divorce. It's a deliberate attempt to strip you of your marital rights. And given the introduction of your children to a secondary household without your consent, that adds another layer of instability. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, not because of the truth, but because of how clearly she spoke it. She leaned forward. "But you came at the right time," she said. "You have more leverage than he hopes you realize." "Good," I whispered, "because I intend to use it." A small approving smile tugged at her mouth. "First," she said, "we'll file a response. Not an agreement, a counter-petition. Second, we immediately request financial disclosures and a freeze on assets if needed. Third," she paused, "has he ever shown signs of wanting full custody?" "No," I said, "but he included terms that minimize my time." "That tells me what I need to know," she murmured. "He's trying to set a foundation for future negotiations. We won't allow it." I felt something rise inside me, not anger, not vindictiveness, strength, real, grounded strength. I need to protect my children, my home, my peace. "And you will," she replied. "But I need one thing from you." "What's that?" Her gaze softened. "Calm, patience, strategy." I nodded. "I have all three," I said quietly. "And now I have purpose too." She extended her hand. "Let's begin." I shook it. The moment our hands met, something shifted inside me, like the moment a woman tightens the grip on the reins and finally decides to turn the horse toward the storm instead of away from it. Because she knows now, she can outride it. When I drove home, my mind wasn't spinning like before. It was focused, cold, and clear, like the air right before winter. Marcus was in the kitchen when I walked in, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. His shoulders tensed when he heard the door open. "Hey," he said cautiously. "Where'd you go?" "To see an attorney," I replied. "You didn't have to do that. We could have talked first." "We already talked," I reminded him. "Now we act." His jaw worked slowly, tension flickering beneath his skin. "What kind of attorney?" "A real one, not the kind that files papers behind someone's back." He didn't respond. I slid past him toward the sink to pour a glass of water. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. When I turned around, he was staring at me, arms crossed, frustration beginning to surface. "Why are you trying to make this messy?" "I'm not the one who created the mess. I'm just cleaning up after it." "You're being dramatic." "No," I said softly. "I'm being awakened." He blinked, maybe at the firmness in my voice, maybe at the unfamiliar woman standing in front of him. Because this wasn't the version of me he used to manipulate. This wasn't the tired, hopeful wife. This wasn't the woman begging for scraps of love. This was the woman who saw the battlefield clearly and intended to win. I took a sip of my water and met his eyes with a steadiness I knew he didn't expect. "The attorney will be in touch," I said. "All communication goes through her now." He stared at me, stunned. "You're really doing this?" he whispered. I nodded. "I am, and Marcus, this is me being civil." His throat bobbed with a swallow. "Because if you come at my home, my children, or my livelihood again?" I stepped closer, my voice low, steady, unwavering. "You're going to meet a side of me you never believed I had." For the first time since this began, I watched fear settle into his face. Not fear of me, but fear of the consequences of what he had already done. And I walked away, leaving him in the kitchen, standing in the wreckage of truces he thought would never catch up to him. But they did. And I was done absorbing the impact.
For the next 2 weeks, the house felt like a strange kind of battlefield. Not loud, not violent, not chaotic. No, the kind of battlefield where every movement is calculated, every silence holds meaning, and every breath feels like preparation. Marcus stayed in the guest room. He moved carefully around me, careful like I was a fragile glass he'd cracked, but didn't want to shatter. But he didn't understand something fundamental. I wasn't glass. I was stone, warming into steel. The children sensed the shift, though they didn't understand it. Kids always know when the air in a home turns heavy. They know when laughter becomes a rare visitor. They know when hugs feel like armor. I protected them from the details, but not from the truth. Kids don't need perfect families. They need honesty and stability. So I gave them both, in a way their ages could carry. Mommy and Daddy are figuring things out, I told them gently one evening as we made dinner together. And no matter what happens, you're safe, you're loved, you're ours. My daughter looked up at me with big, searching eyes. Are you and Daddy mad at each other? We're hurt, I said honestly, brushing a curl away from her cheek. But grown-ups can heal, just like kids do. She nodded slowly. Her brother looked unsure, but he didn't ask anything. He focused on slicing strawberries, his little hands careful and deliberate, like one wrong press could change everything. I kissed the tops of their heads, letting them feel the certainty I was building, brick by brick. Because if Marcus had one weapon left, it was fear. And I was taking that away from him too. 2 days later, Attorney Baines called me with something she referred to as an update. Her tone told me it wasn't good news, or rather, not surprising news. Your husband transferred $14,000 to a secondary account, she said, 2 months ago. My breath stilled. That account isn't listed on the financial disclosures he gave me, I murmured. Correct, she said. He didn't disclose it because he didn't want it traced. I pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead, steadying myself. What can we do? We file an injunction, she said, and we request a forensic accountant. He'll learn quickly that hiding money is not the small inconvenience he thinks it is. I exhaled slowly, not shaken, but strengthened. Another brick, another beam, another piece of truth sliding into place. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, she replied. We're building your case piece by piece. When I hung up, I didn't cry. My tears had purpose now, and I wouldn't waste them. That evening, Marcus must have sensed the shift in my energy because he approached me in the living room, arms folded tightly across his chest. We need to talk, he said. I looked up from the book I wasn't really reading. About what? You filed for asset freezes, correct? You talked to a forensic accountant. My attorney did, I corrected. His voice tightened. You're escalating this. I closed my book slowly. Marcus, I said softly, I'm not escalating anything. I'm protecting myself. I'm protecting my children. He paced a few steps, running his hand through his hair, an anxious gesture I'd seen 100 times, but felt nothing for now. You're blowing everything out of proportion, he muttered. Am I asked quietly. You opened a secondary bank account. You hid assets. You filed for divorce behind my back. You introduced a stranger to our children. You tried to get me to sign away my rights. He didn't respond. You want to call this an overreaction? I said. Imagine if I had done those things to you. He swallowed hard. This wasn't supposed to be a fight, he murmured. But it is, I said, because you chose deceit. His voice softened, almost pleading. Can we at least talk, privately? Just you and me? No, I said firmly.
not without legal representation present. He blinked, stunned. "You're treating me like an enemy." I stood up, meeting his eyes with a steadiness he wasn't used to. "You made yourself one." The truth hit him so sharply that he took a step back, an actual physical step, like his body couldn't hide how deeply it landed. But I didn't linger. I walked past him, leaving him standing alone in the space he hollowed out himself. A week later, there was a knock at the door, around 7 p.m. I paused mid-step, wondering if it was a delivery or one of the neighborhood kids. But when I opened the door, I froze. It was her, the mistress, the woman my children had eaten dinner with, played with, smiled at, the one who had asked for my blessing. She stood there in a cream-colored blouse and jeans, clutching her purse, her hair pinned back in a neat bun that tried too hard to look mature. "Hi," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. She shifted nervously. I know this is unexpected, but I really need to speak with you." Her hands trembled, her voice shook, her eyes wouldn't meet mine. And I realized something. She wasn't here with confidence. She wasn't here with entitlement. She wasn't here with Marcus's plan. She was here because something had gone very, very wrong. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door just enough to keep the kids from hearing anything. "You have 5 minutes," I said. She nodded quickly. "I didn't know," she blurted. "I didn't know he was still with you." I stared at her, unmoving. "You expect me to believe that?" Her voice cracked. "I swear, he told me you were separated, he told me you were filing, he told me you knew about me. He said the house was already in his name." The last line hit me like a cold gust of wind. She swallowed hard. "I found out yesterday that none of that was true." I exhaled slowly, long and steady, while the pieces repositioned themselves inside my mind. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the mastermind either. She was a pawn, a foolish pawn, a young woman thrown into a grown man's deception without the wisdom to recognize the danger. But that didn't absolve her. "You still let my children into your house," I said. She lowered her head. "I thought it was okay. I really believed you should have verified," I cut in. "A woman doesn't let another woman's children into her house without speaking to their mother. Ever." Her eyes welled. "I know, and I'm sorry. Truly." There was silence. A long, heavy silence that settled between us like dust after a collapse. She looked up again. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here because I think he's lying to both of us." I stared at her, and for the first time, I saw fear behind her eyes. Real fear. "What did he lie to you about?" I asked. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. He told me he didn't have another house." My breath stilled. But she wasn't done. "And yesterday, someone came to the door looking for him." Her voice trembled so hard she had to steady herself on the porch railing. "A woman with a baby." My heart dropped, not because of the revelation itself, but because of the truth it carried. I didn't know the whole story yet. Not even close.
I didn't expect to find peace in the lobby of a law firm. But there I was, sitting on a sleek gray chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Real, solid, grounded control. The building was modern, all glass and steel, with framed certificates along the walls and the faint scent of bergamot drifting through the air. I had arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to observe everything. Who walked in, who walked out, who belonged here, who didn't. I wasn't stepping into a war blind. I was stepping in prepared. "Mrs. the receptionist called. I stood. "Yes." "Attorney Delgado will see you now." Attorney. Not lawyer, not legal professional, attorney. The word had weight. Exactly the kind I needed. I followed the receptionist down the hall, passing polished glass doors and modern art pieces that looked like someone had splashed confidence onto a canvas. My attorney's office was warm, not sterile. Bookshelves, 2 plants, a round table instead of a desk, creating a barrier. And behind it, a woman who looked like she could negotiate peace treaties or end empires, depending on which option got better results. "Thank you for coming in," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I've reviewed the documents you uploaded. Please sit." I sat. She sat. Then she opened the folder. Not the one Marcus had given me, the one I had given her. The reassembled, reorganized, annotated version. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to tell you something. Most clients come into my office emotional, angry, panicked. But you came in prepared." She flipped through the pages with appreciation, not petty. "You did half my job for me." I didn't blush, but I sat a little straighter. Because for the first time, someone saw the clarity beneath my heartbreak. Attorney Delgado tapped a red line section. "Let's start with the biggest issue. He attempted to hide assets. Not very well, but he tried." I exhaled through my nose, the closest thing to a laugh I could manage. "He thought I wouldn't notice." "That's because he doesn't know you anymore," she said simply. The statement landed harder than it should have. She pulled out a second sheet. "Here's what we do. We file a notice of representation immediately. That stops him from communicating directly with you about the divorce. Everything goes through me. No more pressure, no more guilt, no more manipulation." I nodded slowly. "And the house?" I asked. Her smile sharpened. "Yes, let's talk about that." She turned to the clause he had written about transferring primary residence to himself. "This," she said, "is laughable." I blinked. "Laughable? Legally? Emotionally? Strategically?" She gestured toward the page. He might as well have written, "Please deny my petition." My lungs loosened for the first time in days. "We will challenge this," she continued. "And frankly, we will win. The court will not remove the primary caregiver of 2 children from the home without extraordinary cause, and he has none." I inhaled deeply, letting the truth settle inside me. "You're safe. The kids are safe. The house is safe." Something inside me cracked. Not in the breaking sense, in the releasing sense. Relief. The heavy, quiet kind, unfurled in my chest like a warm tide. But before it could settle fully, she flipped to another page. "And now," she said, "let's address something else. The girlfriend." I stiffened. Her tone, however, remained purely professional. "You're not required to like her, but her existence matters legally for one reason. He involved her in the petition." "Yes," I said, jaw tightening. "He did." "That was reckless," she said. "Judges do not like when someone tries to formally insert a new partner into a custody arrangement or property settlement before the ink is even dry on the divorce. It undermines his credibility and it shows instability." "Good," I said quietly, "because she's around my kids." Attorney Delgado raised her gaze, steady and sharp. "We'll address that too. It won't be ignored." She set her pen down and folded her hands. "Now tell me," she said, "what outcome do you want? Not what you think is fair, not what you think the court will give you. What do you want?" I didn't answer immediately, because for so long, what I wanted never mattered. I survived. I compromised. I made room. But now? I looked up. "I want the house." "Good. Done." "I want primary custody." "Also done." "I want him out. Fully out. No more half in, half out, moving between the rooms of this family like some kind of ghost." "Then we'll request temporary orders," she said. "He moves out until the divorce is complete." I swallowed. "And I want him held accountable," I whispered. "For the lies, for the hidden assets,
for trying to do this behind my back, for dragging her into our lives like she had a right. Attorney Delgado nodded slowly. You're asking, she said, not for revenge, but for accountability. Those are not the same thing. No one had ever said that to me before. Yes, I said. Accountability. Then we'll pursue it. She clicked her pen, wrote 3 short notes, and closed the folder with finality. You're going to be okay. More than okay. You're about to get your life back. I exhaled, long, steady, releasing months of tension I didn't realize I was still holding. When do we start? I asked. She smiled. We already did. When I walked out of the office, the sky had cleared, sunlight warming the pavement beneath my feet. I felt taller, lighter. Not because the situation had changed, but because I had. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. I wasn't defending. I was choosing. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. We need to talk. I stared at the screen and felt nothing. Not fear, not panic, not pain, just clarity. Then I typed back, going forward, please contact my attorney. And I hit send. I got inside the car, closed the door, and looked straight ahead at the road in front of me. For the first time in a long time, it felt like it was mine.
That night, I went home early. The house smelled faintly of my husband's cologne, a lingering ghost from days that no longer existed. I turned the key slowly, listening to the familiar creak of the front door, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock. Everything was the same, yet nothing was the same. The children weren't home yet. Marcus had taken them, as always, in the evenings, but this time I didn't feel the usual hollow pit in my stomach. I felt prepared, grounded, focused. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. It wasn't for me anymore. I poured a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling like a soft sigh into the air. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around the warm mug, listening to the silence. My silence. It was no longer suffocating. It was restorative. My mind wandered, and I let it. I thought about the past 10 years. The laughter, the birthdays, the quiet evenings watching movies on the couch. The subtle shifts I hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. And then the betrayals, the lies, the hidden house, the plan to erase me. I closed my eyes and exhaled, tasting the tea and the faint warmth of clarity. I had survived this far. I could survive what came next. And I would. I didn't know exactly what justice would look like yet, but I knew it would feel righteous, measured, and intentional. Not explosive, not reckless, just fair. The next morning, the law office called with a list of what we needed: documents, bank statements, copies of emails, and messages. I spent hours going through files, pulling together every thread of evidence I could find. Every note, every transaction, every curious detail from the last year that I had brushed off. I realize now that it wasn't paranoia, it was clarity that had been waiting to surface. By mid-afternoon, I had a folder thick with proof of Marcus's deception. The second house, the hidden bank accounts, the receipts for vacations he took with her while pretending to work late. Even little things like the grocery runs and notes from the kids' teachers, all pointing to the same undeniable truth. He had been living a double life for years. When Attorney Delgado saw the stack, her eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled. This, she said, tapping the top, is everything we need. I nodded, trying to ignore the lump in my throat. Everything I had collected wasn't just paper. It was my life, my memory, my children's memories, my dignity. And the mistress? I asked quietly. She leaned back, her gaze firm. She's just another witness now. A piece of paper in court. Her opinions, her feelings, her requests, none of that will carry more weight than your rights as a mother. I exhaled, letting a little of the tension slip. I didn't need her blessing. I didn't need her approval. I needed justice, and that was mine to claim. Later that evening, I sat with the kids. Dinner was simple: spaghetti, garlic bread, and my oldest daughter's insistence on salad first. We laughed. We told stories about the week, and when Marcus called to tell them goodnight, I could hear the confusion in his voice when I calmly told him I would be the one deciding pickup and drop-off schedules, with his lawyer copied on every email. He didn't argue. Not yet. But I knew he would try later. And I was ready. After the kids went to bed, I sat on the edge of my bed, reflecting. I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I was resolute. There was a quiet strength settling into me, an anchor I hadn't realized I needed. For years, I had let my identity blur with his, the wife, the mother, the household manager. Now I felt like I was reclaiming myself, slowly, piece by piece. I thought about the day when his mistress had reached out, asking me to bless the papers as an ex-wife. I remembered the nausea, the absurdity, the anger. But I also remembered something else. The moment I realized that no one could take my children, my home, or my sense of self without me noticing. That realization, more than anything else, had ignited this fire in me. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, I am not erased, not ever. And in that moment, for the first time since the shock of the betrayal, I truly believed it. The next week was a blur of legal motions, phone calls, and strategizing with Delgado. Every time Marcus tried to manipulate the narrative, text messages claiming co-parenting or for the kids, we countered with proof. Every time he tried to intimidate me with threats, Delgado reminded him he had no leverage. And every time I felt a flicker of doubt, I reminded myself of something even stronger. My children's faces, trusting me, needing me, depending on me to fight, not with hate, but with clarity. And fight I did. By the end of the second week, a temporary order had been issued. Marcus had to vacate the marital home immediately, with supervised visitation for the children. The second house? Irrelevant. His girlfriend? Irrelevant. Their pleas, manipulations, and false narratives had no place in this process. I wasn't seeking to destroy him. I was seeking to protect what was mine, what belonged to my children, what belonged to me. That evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. The world felt still. The air smelled like rain, and somewhere in the distance, a bird chirped a soft note. I realized then that life wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about reclaiming space for yourself and your family. It was about knowing your worth, even when someone else tried to diminish it. And slowly, very slowly, I felt a sense of calm. Not because the war was over, but because I was no longer the person who had been taken by it. I was no longer reactive. I was alive, awake, and fully present. Tomorrow, the court would continue, and Marcus would face the consequences of his choices. But tonight, I allowed myself this moment. A sip of wine, the laughter of children from upstairs, the quiet night wrapping around me like a blanket. I had survived. I had fought. And I had learned that no one can erase you unless you let them.
The morning of the final court hearing, I awoke before the sun, nerves buzzing like static electricity in my chest. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that my daughter had painted for me, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam curling from the dark liquid. Today wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about truth, about reclaiming my life, about protecting the children who still didn't understand the full extent of their father's betrayal. I dressed in a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. I didn't want attention, just authority, just presence. When the kids appeared for breakfast, rubbing sleepy eyes and clinging to their cereal bowls, I smiled gently. "Mommy's going to be at work today," I said lightly. "I'll see you this afternoon." They nodded, still too young to know the storm that surrounded us. At the courthouse, the air was cold and sterile. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I clutched my folder, my lifeline of evidence, and tried to steady my breathing. Delgado walked beside me, her presence a calm anchor in the chaos of my racing thoughts. Marcus arrived shortly after, flanked by his lawyer, his expression a practiced mask of indifference. But I saw the tremor in his jaw, the quick glance at the children's school photos I had accidentally left peeking from my folder. "Ready?" Delgado whispered. I nodded, heart hammering. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings began. The mistress sat quietly in the back, her hands folded, her face pale. I noticed her trembling slightly when my name was called. Part of me wanted to gloat, but I didn't. That wasn't my victory. My victory was my children's safety, my dignity, my reclaimed life. The judge asked for opening statements. Delgado spoke first, laying out a clear narrative, years of hidden deceit, the secret house, the financial manipulations, the children's emotional well-being at stake. Every document, every bank statement, every receipt was placed carefully on the table, a mosaic of truth that could not be denied. Marcus's lawyer tried to frame the situation as misunderstanding and co-parenting challenges, but each claim was deflected with calm precision. Delgado's voice never wavered, and with every objection he raised, I felt the weight of years of deception lifting slightly from my shoulders. At one point, the mistress was called to testify. Her face went pale when Delgado asked her to explain her relationship with Marcus and the plan she had tried to involve me in, signing away my rights, pretending everything was normal. I watched her falter under oath, stumbling over excuses, revealing more than she realized. The court scribbled notes, the judge raised an eyebrow, and I felt a quiet vindication settle deep in my chest. When the hearing concluded, the judge ruled in our favor. Marcus would remain legally bound to his obligations, full custody arrangements under supervision, child support, and no interference with the children's home life. The mistress's attempts to manipulate the process were dismissed entirely. I remember the moment I exhaled so deeply, it felt like air was filling every corner of my body. Relief, joy, and exhaustion mixed into a single, overwhelming wave. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I simply closed my eyes and let it sink in. My children were safe. My heart was mending, and I, at last, was free to breathe. Outside the courthouse, Delgado hugged me briefly. "You did this," she said softly. "You claimed what's yours." I nodded, feeling the warmth of her words. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. Back at home, the kids ran into my arms, chatter tumbling over themselves as they shared the small details of their day. I listened, laughing softly, ruffling their hair, savoring every little sound. Marcus wasn't present, and that was exactly how it should be. That night, I tucked the children into bed and sat on the edge of their shared room, hands folded in my lap. I reflected on everything: the years of love, the betrayal, the fight, the eventual triumph. And I realized that the deepest lesson wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about knowing your worth, trusting your instincts, and never allowing someone else to define your life. I leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, and let the silence fill me with peace. My children were safe, my heart was mending, and I, at last, was free to breathe.
The days after the courtroom felt almost surreal. It was as if the air itself had shifted, carrying away the tension that had gripped our home for months. The kids were calmer. Laughter returned to the kitchen in gentle waves, and even the simple act of walking through the front door no longer carried the weight of fear or uncertainty. I began small rituals of healing. Mornings were for coffee and quiet reflection, afternoons for walks with the children through the nearby park, where they chased squirrels and tossed leaves, their faces lit with sunlight and innocence. I would sit on a bench, watch them play, and remind myself over and over: Life had given me back what truly mattered. I also started to reach out to friends I had neglected over the years. There was Marlene, who had stood by me through college heartbreaks and career struggles, and Simone, whose laughter could always cut through any sadness. I realized that in the whirlwind of betrayal and court battles, I had lost touch with these lifelines of support. Reconnecting with them reminded me that my life had dimensions beyond Marcus, beyond the drama, beyond the betrayal. One afternoon, I found myself cleaning the garage, something that had been neglected for months. Amid the dust and clutter, I discovered old photographs of the kids and babies, Marcus holding them awkwardly, their tiny fingers curled around his, and me smiling with a peace that now seemed foreign. I cried quietly, not from sadness, but from the release of years of pent-up emotions. The betrayal had been real, yes, but so was the life I had built, and no one could erase that. I also took time to reflect on Marcus's mistress. I realized that anger and resentment would only weigh me down further. She had played her part in the deception, but ultimately, she was a reflection of Marcus's choices, not mine. Letting go of bitterness became part of my daily ritual. I would close my eyes and repeat, I am not defined by their lies. I am defined by my love, my courage, and my integrity. Therapy became another cornerstone of my healing. Sitting with a counselor helped me untangle the layers of manipulation, the years of subtle erasure, and the moments of doubt I had quietly carried. I learned to recognize the signs of emotional abuse, to assert boundaries without guilt, and to communicate honestly with the children about what had happened in age-appropriate ways. The children themselves began to express their emotions more freely. My daughter drew pictures of our family, with me at the center, smiling and strong. My son wrote little notes in his notebook about how much he loved our home. They were small gestures, but monumental in their significance, proof that, despite the chaos, we were rebuilding trust, love, and stability. As the weeks turned into months, I embraced new opportunities. I signed up for a local writing workshop, pouring my thoughts into stories and essays that mirrored some of my experiences. The act of writing became cathartic, a way to process pain, gratitude, and hope simultaneously. I discovered that the stories I thought were mine alone could resonate with others, offering solace to those who had felt betrayed or silenced. I also re-examined my career. Having devoted so much energy to managing a household and navigating Marcus's duplicity, I had neglected professional ambitions. Slowly, deliberately, I started taking steps toward a leadership role I had once dreamed of. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, became a reaffirmation of my worth, independent of any marriage or man. And then there were the quiet evenings, when I sat on the porch after the children were asleep, the sky turning shades of purple and gold. I would sip tea, feel the cool breeze on my skin, and think about how far we had come. I thought about Marcus, about his deception, and realized that while he had attempted to erase me, it was I who had survived stronger, wiser, and more grounded than ever. Healing, I realized, wasn't a linear process. There were still moments when a memory would pierce through, the empty seat at the anniversary dinner, the realization that the children had spent days at a stranger's house. But now, instead of anger, I met those moments with awareness. They were reminders of resilience, not failures. Each painful memory became a stone in the foundation of my new life. I made a promise to myself. I would never let someone else's choices dictate my happiness again. I would teach my children to recognize their own worth, to demand respect, and to never fear speaking their truths. And most importantly, I would embrace life fully. Every joy, every sorrow, every ordinary moment that made our family whole.
The months that followed were quieter, yet they held a depth I hadn't anticipated. Life had slowed down, allowing me to notice the small joys that I had once taken for granted. The smell of rain on warm pavement, the sound of my children's laughter bouncing off the walls of our home, the way the sun poured through the kitchen window in the late afternoon. These ordinary moments carried an extraordinary weight now, for they were ours, untouched by lies, by betrayal, by manipulation. One evening, as I tucked the kids into bed. My daughter whispered, "Mommy, I'm glad it's just us now." Her words struck a chord deeper than I expected. I realized that while Marcus had tried to rewrite our story, he had failed in the most crucial way. He could not erase the bond we shared, the love that had always been real. I kissed her forehead, feeling a surge of protectiveness and gratitude. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "We are exactly where we're meant to be." The healing process extended beyond the walls of our home. I reconnected with family members I had distanced myself from over the years, partly out of shame, partly because Marcus had subtly isolated me. Aunt Ruthie and I began Sunday afternoon lunches again. And my older brother, who had always been quietly observant, started stopping by unannounced to check on us. Their support was unwavering, and it reminded me that no one can face life's storms entirely alone. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my recovery. During one particularly revealing session, my counselor asked me a question that stayed with me. "What does freedom feel like to you?" I realized in that moment that freedom wasn't about revenge or restitution. It wasn't about Marcus signing the papers or even the court ruling. Freedom was about reclaiming myself, my agency, my sense of purpose. It was about walking through my days without fear or guilt, with the courage to embrace joy even after betrayal. I began to notice subtle shifts in the kids too. My son, once withdrawn and quiet, started opening up about school and his friends. He told me about a boy who had moved into the neighborhood and how he had taught him a new card game. My daughter, who had always been fiercely independent, began asking my guidance in small matters, like what to wear for a school performance or how to make a friendship bracelet. These moments were ordinary, but to me they were triumphs, proof that our family was healing and thriving. One afternoon, while clearing out old files and boxes, I stumbled upon a letter I had written to Marcus years ago. It was filled with hope, love, and trust, emotions I had poured into him without reservation. I held the paper in my hands and let myself grieve briefly for the life that had been lost, for the version of me that had been so naive. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to myself, "That was then. This is now." I also made a conscious choice to forgive, though not for Marcus's sake, for my own. Forgiveness was not about excusing his actions or forgetting the betrayal. It was about releasing the grip of bitterness and reclaiming my peace. I would never allow someone else's wrongdoing to dictate my happiness or my children's well-being. As winter approached, I took the kids to a small cabin by the lake. It was a modest retreat, but it became our sanctuary. We built fires, roasted marshmallows, and shared stories late into the night. One evening, my daughter asked if she could sleep with me in the big bed. As I held her close, I realized that this simple act, feeling my children safe, loved, and whole, was the ultimate victory. The betrayal that had once threatened to consume us no longer had power here. I began writing again, this time for more than personal catharsis. I submitted essays to local magazines, sharing my experiences under a pseudonym at first. To my surprise, readers reached out thanking me for articulating feelings they had struggled to voice themselves. The letters poured in, stories of betrayal, survival, and resilience. I realized that my pain had transformed into purpose. What had once been a source of shame and anger had become a beacon for others who were silently suffering. By spring, I was leading workshops for women in my community, teaching them how to rebuild their lives after betrayal. I shared practical tools, but more importantly, I shared hope. I told them, "You are not alone. You are not powerless. Your life is yours to reclaim." Watching their faces light up with recognition and determination became one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. One afternoon, while walking through the park with the kids, a neighbor who had witnessed some of the earlier chaos stopped to chat. She said, "You look different, stronger, happier." I smiled, feeling the warmth of truth in her words. It was not about appearances. It was about the inner fortitude I had cultivated, the life I had fought to protect, and the love that had endured. I realized then that the narrative Marcus had tried to erase had been rewritten, not by him, but by me. The chapters of pain, betrayal, and fear had transformed into ones of courage, resilience, and love. And in those chapters, we, my children and I, were thriving, unbroken, and free. Spring had fully arrived, and with it came a sense of renewal that felt almost tangible. The flowers in our yard were bursting into color, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh blossoms and newly cut grass. My children ran ahead of me along the sidewalk, their laughter ringing like a bell through the quiet neighborhood. I paused for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun touch my face, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: serenity. Marcus was no longer a constant shadow over my life. Court rulings and legal settlements had ensured that he could no longer manipulate our family, and the children's well-being was secured. Yet even with the battles won on paper, the emotional weight of his betrayal lingered. It was subtle, a memory here, a fleeting doubt there, but I had learned to acknowledge it without letting it control me. Each time I felt that sting, I reminded myself, I survived this. I fought for us, and I emerged stronger. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. I reflected on how much had changed in the last year. The woman Marcus had brought into our lives, the one who had once asked me for my blessing, had faded from my thoughts entirely. She no longer held any power over me. In her request for papers, she had thought she could manipulate me into compliance. But all she had done was remind me of my strength. I realized that the most profound transformation had been within myself. I was no longer the woman who had blindly trusted, who had allowed her heart to be manipulated, who had questioned her worth because of another person's choices. I had reclaimed my identity, my dignity, and my voice. And in doing so, I had become a model of resilience for my children, a living example that even when life breaks you, you can piece yourself back together, stronger and wiser. The kids and I started planning small adventures, little rituals to mark our reclaimed lives. We took weekend trips to the nearby hills, picnics by the lake, and Sunday morning bike rides. On one of these rides, my son grabbed my hand and said, "Mom, I like this life. Just us." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. The bond between us had deepened in ways I could never have imagined, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by love and trust. I also allowed myself to dream again, not big, unrealistic dreams, but small, meaningful ones. I signed up for a community art class, something I had always wanted to do but never pursued. I began painting landscapes, scenes of the mountains we visited and the skies we watched together. Each stroke of the brush was liberating, a declaration that my creativity, my life, and my happiness belonged to me and no one else. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a woman I had never met, but whose words struck a chord deep inside me. She wrote about her own experience with betrayal, and how reading a story I had shared in a community newsletter had inspired her to leave an abusive relationship. She thanked me for showing her that healing was possible, that reclaiming one's life was not only achievable,
but necessary. I held the letter in my hands and felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Marcus's actions, as cruel as they had inadvertently set me on a path to help others. Pain had been transformed into guidance, and loss had been converted into wisdom. I understood then that our experiences, even the ones we wish had never happened, can serve a higher purpose if we allow them to. As evening fell, I stepped onto the porch and watched the sun dip below the horizon. My children's laughter had long since faded into sleepy whispers inside the house. The world was quiet, and in that silence, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was free from fear, free from resentment, free from the shadow of someone who had once tried to erase me. The life I had fought for was here, tangible and real, filled with love, hope, and unshakable resilience. I whispered a quiet vow to myself. I will protect this life. I will nurture it. I will continue to grow, to love, and to embrace each day fully. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of the past lift completely, leaving me unburdened, empowered, and ready to embrace whatever came next.
Sitting here on my porch, watching the last golden rays of the sun slip behind the horizon, I can't help but think about how fragile life feels, and yet how resilient we can be. My journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and loss was harrowing, but it also taught me something invaluable. No one can define your worth except you. I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing the wrongs of others. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their choices. I found strength I didn't know I had. And in reclaiming my life, I also became a better guide, a better mother, a better version of myself. My children saw me rise, and I hope they carry that lesson with them for the rest of their lives. To anyone watching who has been hurt by someone they loved or blindsided by betrayal, know this: your pain does not define you. Your actions, your courage, and your resilience do. Life will test you, sometimes cruelly, but there is always a way to stand again stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. So I ask you, gently, have you ever found strength in the midst of heartbreak? How did you reclaim your life when someone tried to erase you? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes our shared experiences are what heal us the most. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more real-life journeys of love, betrayal, and triumph, because no one should ever face life's storms alone.